My mother-in-law showed up unannounced with a spare key to my house, saying, "I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." When I changed the locks, she told my husband I was trying to exclude her from our lives. It happened on a Saturday morning. The kind of morning where everything feels peaceful. The kind of morning where you wake up, stretch, and feel like you have the whole weekend ahead of you. I was still in my robe, sipping coffee in the kitchen, scrolling on my phone. My husband, Mark, was in the shower. The house was quiet. And then, I heard the front door unlock. Not knock. Unlock. I froze. A second later, the door swung open. And there she was. Brenda. My mother-in-law. Standing in my house. Holding her purse. Smiling like she owned the place. "I just wanted to make sure everything was okay," she said, shutting the door behind her. Like this was normal. Like this was her house. I stared at her, my heart racing. My mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. "Brenda, how did you get in?" She laughed like I was being ridiculous. "Mark gave me a key, honey. Ages ago. I just wanted to check in." Check in? Check in? She was already walking past me, looking around like she was inspecting something. She peeked into the kitchen. "You haven't done the dishes yet? You should do them in the morning, it helps keep the house nice." She stepped into the living room. "Oh, I see you moved the couch." I liked it better before." Then she actually started walking toward my bedroom. That's when I snapped out of my shock. I followed her, blocking the hallway. "Brenda, you can't just let yourself in." She blinked at me, completely unfazed. "Why not?" I clenched my jaw. "Because this is my house. You need to knock. You need to ask before coming over." And you know what she said? She laughed. "Oh, don't be silly. I'm family. Family doesn't need permission." I felt my blood pressure rise so fast I thought my head might explode. Family doesn't need permission? To enter my house? Without knocking? Without asking? I couldn't even speak. I just stood there, hands shaking, watching her walk back to the kitchen and start rearranging things. Like she lived here. And that's when I decided she was never getting in again. That night, I didn't argue with her. I didn't yell. I didn't call Mark and demand he fix it. No. I waited until she left. I waited until I could think clearly. Then I drove straight to the hardware store, bought a new lock set, and changed the locks myself. It took me 20 minutes. 20 minutes to take back my house. When Mark came home and noticed, he frowned. "Did something happen to the lock?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "I changed it." He blinked. "Why?" "Because your mother let herself in this morning like she owned the place." His face went pale. "She what?" "She used a spare key. The one you gave her. The one you never told me about." He rubbed his face, groaning. "Oh, yeah, I gave her one a long time ago. Just in case of emergencies." I folded my arms. "Mark, this wasn't an emergency." She walked in, judged the furniture, criticized the dishes, and was about to go into our bedroom. His eyes widened. "She did what?" "Yeah. That's why I changed the locks." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it, but she's going to be upset." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, I know. And I don't care." The next morning, Brenda showed up again. I watched through the peephole as she pulled out her key. She inserted it. Turned it. Nothing. She tried again. Harder this time. I could see the exact moment she realized she was locked out. She pulled out her phone. A few seconds later, Mark's phone rang. He sighed and answered. "Hey, Mom." "Mark, something's wrong with your door. My key isn't working." I crossed my arms, waiting. Mark looked at me. Then back at the phone. He swallowed. "Mom, we changed the locks." Silence. "Then, you did what?" I could hear her through the phone. She was so loud even Mark winced. "Mom," he said carefully, "you can't just come over unannounced. You need to ask first. I'm your mother." She was losing it. I mean full-on meltdown mode. "Are you serious? You changed the locks? You're shutting me out of your life? Is this her doing?" I rolled my eyes. "Here we go." Mark sighed. "Mom, you let yourself in without asking. That's not okay. I was just trying to help." I turned around and walked to the kitchen. I wasn't about to waste my morning listening to her dramatics. Mark kept talking to her, trying to calm her down, but it was useless. She wasn't mad about the lock. She was mad because she lost control. Brenda didn't take it well. Over the next few days, she went full drama queen mode. She called Mark every single day. Left guilt trip voicemails. Sent texts that said things like, "I can't believe my own son would do this to me. I guess I'm just not part of your family anymore. She's trying to take you away from me." And the best one, what kind of wife keeps a son from his mother? She even tried to get other family members involved. She called Mark's sister, his aunt, even his dad, who is divorced from her and can't stand her. She told them I was trying to cut her out of Mark's life. Luckily, Mark's sister saw through it immediately. She actually texted me, "Mom's on a rampage. Stay strong. She's being crazy." But Mark? At first, he hesitated. Not because he agreed with her, but because she was his mother. I could tell he felt guilty. He hated conflict. He hated seeing her upset. One night, he sat down next to me on the couch and sighed. "I don't know what to do." I looked at him. "Mark, this is simple. Do you want your mother to have unlimited access to our house?" "No, of course not." "Then what's the problem?" He rubbed his face. I don't want to hurt her feelings." I let out a sharp laugh. "Mark, she's not hurt. She's mad she didn't get her way. There's a difference." He didn't say anything. Because he knew I was right. Brenda did not give up. If anything, being locked out made her worse. She wasn't just upset, she was furious. And when Brenda is mad, she doesn't yell or scream like a normal person. No. She plots. She schemes. She turns into a professional victim and makes sure everyone around her knows just how cruelly she's been treated. I saw it coming. Mark didn't. It was about a week after we changed the locks. Things had been quiet, which should have been my first red flag. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when Mark's phone rang. "Brenda." I ignored it. He ignored it too. Then she called again. And again. And again. Mark sighed, finally answering. "Mom, what is it?" Then his face dropped. "Wait, what? When? Are you okay?" My stomach clenched. I turned off the stove and walked over. "What's going on?" Mark covered the phone and whispered, "She fell. She says she hit her head." I raised an eyebrow. "And she called you instead of 911? He hesitated. "She says she's too dizzy to drive. She wants me to come over." I crossed my arms. "Mark. Do you really think this is an emergency?" He hesitated. "I mean, what if she really is hurt?" I sighed. I knew that look on his face. He was going to go. Mark rushed over to Brenda's house. I stayed home. Something about this felt off. An hour later, he walked back in looking pissed. I set down my book. "Well?" He dropped onto the couch and rubbed his temples. She was completely fine. Shocking. He exhaled sharply. "She said she fell in the kitchen and hit her head on the counter. But when I got there, she was sitting on the couch, watching TV, eating a bowl of ice cream." I snorted. "So, no injuries?" "Not a single scratch." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're surprised?" He sighed. "No. Just annoyed." Then he hesitated. Like there was more. I narrowed my eyes. "What else?" He sighed again, rubbing his face. She brought up the locks again." I closed my eyes, already done with this conversation. Of course she did. She said she just wants to feel included. She said she wants to have access in case something happens to us. I opened my eyes and stared at him. "Mark, she just faked an emergency to guilt trip you. Do you really think she wants a key for our safety?" He was silent. Because he knew I was right. Brenda wasn't done. Since her medical emergency didn't work, she tried something else. She showed up at our house the next morning. At 7 a.m. I was barely awake, standing in the kitchen with my coffee when I saw movement outside the window. I turned my head, and there she was. Standing on our porch. Hands on her hips. Staring at the door. She wasn't knocking. She wasn't ringing the doorbell. She was just standing there. Waiting. Like a horror movie. Mark walked in, groggy, rubbing his face. Who is at the door this early? I just pointed. Your mother. His eyes widened. Are you serious? Go see what she wants. Mark groaned and opened the door. Mom? What are you doing here? She pushed past him into the house. I need to talk to you. Mark sighed. Mom, it's too early for this. She turned to me. Can I speak to my son alone? I took a slow sip of my coffee. Nope. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine. Then I'll say it with you here. She squared her shoulders, dramatic as ever. Mark, I want my key back. Mark blinked. What key? The one you changed. I want a copy. I deserve a copy. Mark let out a breath. Mom, we're not giving you a key. Her eyes flashed. She turned to me. So this is your doing? I raised an eyebrow. Brenda, do you really think it's normal to demand a key to your grown son's house? She crossed her arms. I had a key before. I set my coffee down and leveled her with a look. Yeah. And then you let yourself in unannounced. So you lost that privilege. She clenched her jaw. I was just trying to help. I shrugged. Then help yourself to the door. Mark stifled a laugh. Brenda? She looked like she was going to explode. But instead of yelling, she did something worse. She smiled. A slow, knowing, evil smile. And then she said the words that sent a chill down my spine. We'll see about that. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked out. Mark shut the door behind her, running a hand through his hair. That was unsettling. I nodded. Yeah. And I don't like it. Because that wasn't just a dramatic exit. That was a threat. And I knew Brenda wasn't done yet. Not even close. For a while, I thought that was the worst of it. I thought Brenda would throw her tantrum, get tired, and eventually move on. I was wrong. Instead, she doubled down. She wasn't just going to let this go. No, she was going to prove that I was the villain and that she was the poor, mistreated mother who had been shut out. And she was about to take things to a whole new level. A few days later, I was sitting on the couch, reading, when I heard a knock at the door. A loud, aggressive bang bang bang. I already knew who it was before I even checked. I sighed, got up, and looked through the peephole. Brenda. Arms crossed. Face twisted in anger. I didn't open the door. I just stood there. Watching. She knocked again. Harder. Then, she pulled out her phone and called Mark. From inside the house, I heard his phone buzz on the counter. He looked at me. I looked at him. We both knew. He sighed, grabbed the phone, and answered. Hey, Mom. I'm outside. Open the door. Mark hesitated. Mom, we talked about this. I am your mother. I should not have to ask to come inside my son's house. My blood boiled. Mark glanced at me, then back at the phone. Mom, we're not doing this. You need to leave. Silence. Then, she hissed, she's making you say this, isn't she? I almost laughed. Right. Because Mark, a grown man, couldn't possibly think for himself. Mark's face hardened. No, Mom. This is my decision. If you can't respect our home, you can't come in. Brenda let out this dramatic, shaky sigh, like she was about to burst into tears. I just don't understand how you could do this to me. Mark sighed. Bye, Mom. And then, he hung up. We stood there, listening. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, through the peephole, I saw Brenda stomp down the porch, get into her car, and speed off. I exhaled. That was fun. Mark rubbed his face. She's not done. I can feel it. And once again, he was right. The next week, Brenda started recruiting people. She started with the family. Suddenly, Mark's aunt was calling. His cousin. Even his dad, who, again, cannot stand Brenda, texted him, saying, Your mother is saying you won't let her in your house? What's going on? She told everyone I was isolating Mark. That I was controlling him. That I was turning him against his own mother. When that didn't work, she turned to social media. Oh yes. She made a huge Facebook post about how some people don't respect their parents anymore. How certain wives drive a wedge between a mother and her son. How after everything I've done for him, I've been thrown away like garbage. The comments were a mix of her old church friends comforting her, praying for you, Brenda, And other people asking, what actually happened? But Brenda wouldn't say. She wanted to play the victim without giving details. Because if she told the truth, she'd look insane. Mark was done. He saw the post, shook his head, and said, I need to talk to her. I nodded. Good luck. He called her, and I sat nearby, pretending to read but listening closely. Brenda answered on the first ring. Oh. So you finally decided to call your mother? Mark sighed. Mom, you need to stop this. Stop what? Speaking the truth? No. Lying. Manipulating people. Acting like a victim. You broke into our house, Mom. It wasn't breaking in. I had a key. A key you weren't supposed to use without asking. Brenda made this scoffing noise. I don't understand why this is such a big deal. What is wrong with you? This isn't how I raised you. Mark went quiet for a second. Then, he said something I'll never forget. You're right, Mom. This isn't how you raised me. You raised me to believe that family means control. That you have a right to whatever you want just because we're related. That I should feel guilty for having boundaries. Excuse me? But that's not love. That's not respect. And if you can't respect us, you're not part of our lives. Silence. Then, fine, Brenda snapped. If that's how you feel, then I guess I just won't be your mother anymore. And she hung up. Mark put his phone down, exhaled, and looked at me. Well. That was dramatic. I smirked. Think she'll keep her word? He laughed. Not a chance. And we were right. Brenda went radio silent for a couple of weeks. No calls. No texts. Nothing. And then, we got an email. A long, dramatic email where she formally requested to be let back into the family. Mark ignored it. Then, 2 days later, we got another one. This one was less nice. She demanded that we apologize. That we admit we were wrong. That we give her a new key. Or else. Or else what? Well. That's when I had an idea. A petty, beautiful idea. Mark and I sat down and wrote a response. But instead of apologizing, we made it official. We wrote a family boundaries agreement. We listed all the rules for future interactions, no unannounced visits. No spare key. No guilt trips. No manipulation. If these boundaries aren't followed, she gets cut off completely. Then, we sent it to Brenda and told her she had 48 hours to sign it. And if she didn't? She'd never see us again. Her response? I can't believe you're making me sign a contract just to be your mother. Mark responded, then don't sign it. 2 days later, she signed it. Because in the end, Brenda didn't want to lose. And now? Every time she visits, she knocks. Every time she calls, she asks permission. And every time she tries to guilt-trip Mark, he reminds her, you signed a contract, Mom. She lost. And I have never slept better in my life.